My parents kicked me out at 16 to give my room to my pregnant twin sister. But I survived the years and made them pay with a lesson they'll never forget. The weight of my past presses against me like a storm cloud that refuses to break. At 16, I was cast out of my family's home, left to fend for myself in a world that seemed to have no place for me. Those years of hardship, living in a tattered tent, scraping by on odd jobs and wrestling with the sting of betrayal, shaped me into the man I am today. Now, at 28, I've clawed my way to stability, securing a modest house of my own, a sanctuary built from years of grit and perseverance. But the ghosts of my past have returned, uninvited and unrelenting. My twin sister, her deadbeat husband, and their growing family have shown up at my doorstep, demanding to move in. The audacity of it burns, especially because it was my sister who orchestrated my exile 12 years ago, convincing our parents there was no room for me in their cramped, dysfunctional household. Now, pregnant with her fourth child, she expects me to open my hard-earned home to her chaos. Growing up, I was never the favored child. My parents' preference for my twin sister was as clear as the sun in a cloudless sky. They wanted a daughter, and I was an unwanted byproduct, a shadow trailing behind her radiant existence. They made it no secret that if the pregnancy had yielded only me, they would have ended it. My life, it seems, was an accident permitted only because of her. My sister reveled in this dynamic, her entitlement blooming like a weed in fertile soil. She was the golden child, showered with affection, new clothes and toys that filled our shared room to the brim. I, on the other hand, was an afterthought, given the bare minimum, hand-me-downs on Christmas and our shared birthday, the only times my existence seemed to warrant acknowledgement. If we hadn't been twins, I doubt they would have bothered celebrating my birth at all. Our childhood home, a cramped suburban house, was a battleground of favoritism. My sister and I shared a room, but calling it shared feels like a cruel exaggeration. The space was hers, her clothes spilling out of drawers, her posters plastering the walls, her toys scattered across every surface. My corner was a narrow bed tucked into what felt like a closet, a sliver of space where I was allowed to exist only when it was time to sleep. During the day, I was banished, told that as a girl she needed her privacy. Even when I was sick, I was relegated to the lumpy living room couch, my discomfort secondary to her whims. Complaining was futile. My parents saw their treatment of me as sufficient, a grudging obligation to keep up appearances for nosy relatives. The message was clear. I was a burden, tolerated but never cherished. The only light in those dark years was my grandfather. He saw through the facade of my parents' toxic favoritism, offering me the kind of unconditional love I'd never known at home. He'd sit with me for hours, telling stories of his youth, his weathered hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke of resilience and hope. When he passed away when I was 13, it felt like the world had caved in. His death left a void no one else could fill, and without his support, I was utterly alone in a family that seemed to resent my existence. The loss was a wound that never fully healed, a reminder of the fleeting nature of kindness in my life. By the time I was 16, the tension in our household had reached a breaking point. My sister, always the center of attention, got pregnant by a 19-year-old drifter who'd been kicked out by his own parents after failing the 8th grade 3 times. He was a walking disaster, a man whose idea of pulling his life together was a dead-end job and a trail of bad decisions. My parents, inexplicably, welcomed him with open arms. They arranged a hasty marriage, and my father, a mechanic at an automobile factory, secured him a job as a cleaner. The house, already bursting at the seams with its 2 bedrooms and tiny living area, became even more suffocating. And yet, it was I who was deemed expendable. I'll never forget the day they told me to leave. My sister, with her smug certainty, declared there was no room for me anymore. My parents agreed, their faces devoid of remorse. When I asked if I could at least sleep on the couch, my father dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand, muttering about how he needed it for the nights when my mother's snoring kept him awake. My brother-in-law, with his infuriating nonchalance, chimed in, "Dude, it's not that hard to find a place. I got kicked out at 15 and look at me now, a family, a job, you'll figure it out." His words were a slap in the face, dripping with hypocrisy. If his version of figuring it out meant dragging a minor into his mess and spiraling into addiction, I wanted no part of it. With nowhere to go, I was left to navigate a world that felt hostile and unforgiving. My parents had warned me not to show up at the homes of distant relatives, threatening to spin a narrative that would paint me as the problem. I reached out to friends, hoping for a couch to crash on, but their parents, understandably wary, turned me away. Why would they take in a kid whose own family had discarded him? So, I found myself in a tent, the kind you'd pick up at a discount store, its thin walls offering little protection from the elements. Those years were a blur of survival, odd jobs, cold nights, and the constant ache of rejection. But they also forged something in me, a resilience I didn't know I possessed. I worked, saved, and fought for every step forward, eventually earning enough to buy my house. A small, unassuming place, but mine nonetheless. Now, 12 years later, my sister has reappeared, her family in tow, demanding a place in the life I've built from the ashes of their betrayal. Her narcissism, nurtured by our parents' indulgence, hasn't dimmed. She's pregnant again, her fourth child on the way, and she expects me to open my doors to her chaos. The irony is suffocating. She who ensured I had no home now wants to claim mine. Her husband, still a junkie by all accounts, trails behind her, a living reminder of the dysfunction that's followed me since childhood. I can still hear her voice from all those years ago, insisting there was no space for me, her words sharp as knives. And yet, here she stands, expecting me to erase the past and make room for her. The memories of our childhood flood back, each one a brick in the wall of resentment I've carried for years. I think of the toys I was never allowed to touch, the clothes I never received, the birthday celebrations that were hers in all but name. I think of the nights spent in that cramped closet of a bed, the days banished to the couch, the constant reminder that I was less than. My parents' toxicity was a poison that seeped into every corner of my life, and my sister was its eager messenger. Even now, as I stand in my own home, their presence feels like an invasion, a demand to relive the powerlessness of my youth. I've spent years rebuilding myself, piece by piece, from the wreckage they left behind. This house, these walls, they're more than just a place to live. They're a testament to my survival, a declaration that I am more than the unwanted child they tried to erase. To let my sister and her family in would feel like surrendering the one thing I've fought for, my independence, my peace. Yet there's a part of me that hesitates, that wonders if refusing them makes me as cold as they were. But then I remember the tent, the hunger, the loneliness of those years, and I know I can't let their chaos consume me again. As I face my sister's demands, I'm reminded of my grandfather's words, "You're stronger than you know." He was right. I've carried that strength through every hardship, and I won't let it falter now. This is my home, my refuge, and I won't let it become another battlefield for my sister's entitlement or my parents' neglect. They may see me as the same disposable boy they cast out, but I'm not that child anymore. I'm a man who's built a life despite them, and I'll protect it with everything I have. One classmate living in a garage let me stay for a few months until his parents found out and kicked me out. I slept on a bench on the sidewalk for a few days until the cops rounded me up and brought me home. My parents claimed I had run away. They took me in that night, but my father got me a makeshift tent from a junkyard and told me to set it up in the backyard as a reward for staying silent in front of the cops and not showing up at relatives' places. The tent was still safer than sleeping in the open. Summer was bearable, but winter was brutal. One night it was so cold I thought I might die. I knocked on the house, but no one responded. Desperate, I knocked on my parents' bedroom window, and my dad yelled from inside not to disturb him, or he'd come out and knock me down. I felt so miserable that I wanted to die. I cried the whole night. The next day, I went looking for a job that would provide a place to sleep. A bakery shop needed a worker for their factory about 20 miles away. They agreed to give me a place to sleep and offered food. They baked at home and needed a helping hand, offering me a spot in their backyard, but I had to clean it up. I agreed. The place was messed up with flour and sugar everywhere, not to mention the rodents living off it, but I was at my lowest point and took the job. I packed my stuff and left. My sister was even happy and said, "Good that you're leaving. We don't have space for you here." No one bothered to ask where I was going. I cleaned up the place and made it livable. Initially, it was hard to get rid of the rodents that came searching for food, but eventually I felt comfortable living there. I had to drop out of high school just a few months shy of the final year exams. My friends urged me to stay in my parents' backyard and finish high school, but I had given up. I focused on my job and lived off my salary. Soon I realized I needed to upskill to get a better job. I picked up a few skills. My dad is a mechanic, so I grew up playing with his toolbox, which saved my parents from buying me toys. I also helped Dad with plumbing around the house. I saved up and took a course, eventually landing a job at a car plant. I worked tirelessly to climb the ladder, and now I'm a supervisor. Recently, an old friend was urgently selling his house due to divorce issues and wanted a quick buyer. I was hesitant to buy a 3-bedroom house, but he offered a hefty discount on the market price and allowed me to make the down payment in parts. I jumped at the opportunity. 2 weeks ago, I moved into my new house, and today I found unexpected guests at my door, my parents, sister, and brother-in-law. It was a shock because I had been no contact with them for years, and they hadn't reached out to me either. This house is nearly 15 miles from their place, so there's no way they stumbled upon it by chance. I'm not in touch with any relatives in person or on social media, but I suspect a neighbor might have informed them. I still keep in touch with one old neighbor, and he might have seen pictures of my house on Facebook and told my parents. I have no idea how they figured out the exact address, but my dad knew where I worked, so maybe he got it from there. As soon as I opened the door, they barged into my house. Mom and Dad congratulated me and said they were proud of me. I smiled and offered them a chair. I'm still furnishing the place, so I only have a bed, a few chairs, and a table. My parents sat down and started asking about the house deal. They found it unbelievable that I could buy a house at 35 while they were still renting. Meanwhile, my sister and her deadbeat husband were casually strolling through my house as if planning to move in. I asked them why they suddenly showed up in my life. They said, "Nothing, just checking on you." Funny, huh? They checked up on me when I needed them the least. They started updating me about their lives. Dad has hypertension, my sister has 3 kids, 14, 9, and 4, and she's pregnant again. Well, good for her. I just sat there nodding, debating whether to yell at them or politely ask them to leave. Mom asked if I was getting married or had a girlfriend. I said it's none of her business. She responded, "Why are you so cranky? Is everything all right?" I said everything was fine until they showed up. She laughed and offered to help if settling into the new house was overwhelming for me. Just then, my sister announced, "I've decided we're going to take the bedroom with the attached balcony and bathroom. I'm so excited to have my own bathroom. The kids can have the other room." I flipped out and asked, "What the hell is happening here?" My sister said, "You have a 3-bedroom house and you're a single man. You don't need so much space. You used to live in a tent, so getting a bedroom is quite an upgrade for you. This house is big enough for all of us." My parents cut her off and asked her to attend to her youngest son, who was crying for attention. I looked at my parents and asked what my sister just said. Dad explained that accommodating 7 people in a small house was getting tough. My sister's eldest son, 14, was sleeping on the couch. The middle one was with my parents and the youngest with my sister. Now, with another baby on the way, they needed a bigger house. I screamed, and Mom said, "You know you have a big house now. Can't you take your sister in?" Before she finished, I yelled, "Hell no, I'm not taking anyone into my house." My sister screamed that I owed her for bringing me into this world. The same old story. "Mom and Dad would never have had you if I wasn't there. You owe me a place here. Our house is so crowded I can't even breathe." I replied, "Yes, thanks to you. And thanks for bringing me into this world. Now get out." Before anyone could say anything, I asked them to leave. Dad tried his tough approach, raising his voice and saying it was my duty as the man of the house to take care of my sister. I yelled back that I had no obligation to take care of her, but as parents they were obligated to take care of me, and they failed. He was okay with his grandson sleeping on the couch, but when I asked, he refused and threw me out. I ranted about how I survived with rodents in my employer's garage and lived in a dingy apartment for a decade, but none of them ever checked on me. Mom started sobbing and tried to hug me. I blocked her and asked them to leave. Bill, my brother-in-law, said, "Man up, bro. I've lived that life for years and never complained. You have a big house and you're single. What do you need all this space for?" I gestured for him to shut up. My sister started cussing me for shouting at her husband. I said, "Well, then get out if you don't want me to knock him down." I chased them out of my house without letting them speak another word. I'm fuming with anger. They were always toxic and narcissistic, and now they've turned greedy. I'm not 16 anymore, blindly following their orders like a puppet. If they keep pestering me, I won't hesitate to call the cops on them. My sister and her junkie husband broke into my house. Some of you asked if my sister offered to pay rent. The answer is a big no, she hasn't, and she can't afford rent. She and her junkie husband are freeloaders and child-making machines. They've been leeching off my parents for 12 years, and now they want to do the same to me. It's not like my parents are happy about it. I saw the frustration in their eyes during their last visit, but instead of throwing her out, they're trying to offload those lazy bumps onto me. A week after our first encounter, my mom showed up at my house again. This time, she didn't beat around the bush and told me I should let my sister move in with me. I said, "No way." She repeated the same stuff about how difficult it was to accommodate so many people in a small house, blah blah. Still, it was a no for me. Then she tried to threaten me. I should have seen it coming. She said, "See, honey, You live alone in this big house and you're gone for 12 hours a day. What if someone breaks in? If a family lives here, it would be safer for you, plus you'll get help with cleaning, dishes, and laundry. I said, for the last time, no, and go away. I don't want any of you at my house. A few days later, one of my neighbors told me he saw a pregnant woman with a man and a young boy loitering around my property. They were peeping in through the windows, wandering around the backyard, and it seemed like they were trying to sneak in. He's an old man who sits on his front porch all afternoon. When they noticed he was watching them, they went away. He informed me as a goodwill gesture. I thanked him, gave him my number, and asked him to call me if he ever saw them again. My house wasn't equipped with cameras yet. I had intended to install them over the weekend. Who knew they would break in before then? Just 2 days later, I got a call from my elderly neighbor saying he suspected someone had broken into my house. I rushed home in a panic. He was right. My sister and Bill had broken in through the back window. She said, "We didn't have any other options. You were being a jerk and not allowing us. Now we live here, and you suck it up." I was in shock at how far she went to flaunt her entitlement. Bill came out of the room they had turned into their bedroom and said, "It was pretty smooth, huh?" Without thinking twice, I charged at Bill. My sister stepped in between, and I dragged her aside. I punched him in the face. Their 14-year-old son attacked me with a bottle, and my head started bleeding. The blow wasn't severe, and I was on the verge of blacking out, but my rage kept me conscious. They all panicked at the sight of blood. My sister called my parents and told them what happened. Bill and his son started cleaning up the mess. My neighbor called the cops. My sister and Bill started apologizing and begged me to spare their son from being arrested. I said, "All of you are going down with him." The cops arrived and took my statement. My sister denied all allegations of breaking in and assaulting me. She claimed they were visiting my house, her son played a prank on me, and I accidentally slipped and hurt my head. She said I was mad at them and falsely framing them. What a liar. Meanwhile, my parents arrived and forced me to drop the charges. They all ganged up to make me look like a liar, claiming I was using the cops to settle a grudge against my sister. Thank God my neighbor stepped in and gave his statement. Based on that, the cops arrested them. They had to spend the night behind bars because my parents couldn't afford bail. The next day, they were presented for trial. I went to the hospital to get my wounds dressed. The doctor scanned it for internal injuries. I had to take a couple of days off to nurse my wounds. I pressed assault charges against them and claimed compensation for my losses, and the court agreed that they should bear it. Meanwhile, my parents tried everything to make me drop the charges, but I threatened to sue them for planning the assault. Her son, being a minor, was dealt with according to juvenile law. He got a week in a juvenile facility, and his parents had to pay for restitution, lost wages, and medical bills. My sister and Bill were heavily fined but pleaded to trade part of it for community service. It's been a week since then, and it's been silent. I hope they've learned their lesson and stay away from me. It looks like my parents aren't off my back yet. Yesterday, they showed up at my house again. I slammed the door in their face. They stood outside for almost an hour, requesting me to hear them out. Finally, I had to let them in. I wish I could just yell from the window and threaten them like Dad did to me 12 years ago. Anyway, I asked them why they were at my door again. They both started sobbing and said they needed my help. I said, "If this has anything to do with my sister, then count me out." They said it was about them. Dad said, "You see, I'm growing old and fragile. I cannot work as before. Our house hasn't been repaired in many years. Everything is falling apart." I cut him off and said, "Come to the point." He and Mom wanted to move in with me. As a responsible son, I should take them in. I should have if they were responsible parents, but they were not. I asked what would happen to their house and if they were going to terminate the lease. They said they were going to give that house to my sister. I was like, "Oh, cool, you guys have taken an alternate route to exploit me. Earlier, you tried to dump my sister on me. That plan failed. Now you want to pile on for one last time. My house is not up for grabs, not for anyone." They said my sister was offering to pay me rent for living in my house, which I could use to pay the mortgage. I said, "I don't need her rent. She doesn't need to worry about my mortgage. She should look out for herself instead." Mom started crying, saying it was becoming very difficult for my sister to make ends meet. She doesn't even get proper sleep because her children sleep in the same room. I said, "It's not my problem if she is mindlessly expanding her family without financial planning." They said, "What can we say? You're not agreeing to anything. You don't want to take in your sister, and you won't agree to take us in either. You should at least let us move in with you. The house is too big for one person." I replied, "I don't plan to remain single forever." They tried to emotionally manipulate me, insisting that I should take care of my aging parents. I screamed, "Karma is real. Remember how you threw me out of the house? This is what you get in return. I opened the door for them, and they left with bitter faces. I don't care what they call me, but I'm not going to be a doormat and give in to their demands.